for instance, when he's eating the marmalade at the train station for the first time when they first meet him, and it's everywhere. And as an adult, you think, this is. I remember when my toddlers did this. You would think, how can a single chocolate chip cause so much disaster?
That's right.
And that's what happens to Paddington. It's just like, how did this escalate to such severity?
So Bear Called Paddington. I picked this up the other day, read through it. It's a charming little book. But I did wonder as I was reading it, why do you like it? So I know, Tanya, that you like it. So what is it that you like about
Tanya
A Bear
loves
Called Paddington?
How could you not?
I did. I liked it. I thought it was
I feel
cute.
like I'm having to defend Paddington Bear, and I think it is just one of the most charming books for children that I've read, and I think adults enjoy it too and enjoy the humor. Obviously, you don't enjoy it as much as I do. But I was recently reading an article that Vegan Garoyan wrote from an essay that we're going to publish of his. And he said, children are always seeking out new experiences, and they find them in stories when adults do not spoil these stories by superimposing concepts or rules over the narrative. And then later he says, children live near fairyland and enter into it through play with an ease of which adults are incapable. So I think this is a great little story. I don't think there's anything really deep in it, but I think that's okay. And I think that children will embrace it, and I, as an adult, embrace it. I think he's charming, he's funny, he's innocent in a way that that everybody else around him appreciates. I think the family that adopts him, the Browns, they're your stereotypical couple back when was Paddington written?
I think it was in the 50s.
Was it the 50s? So this would be, 1958.
58.
So this would be, they would be typical. I thought especially toward the beginning when they find Paddington just sitting there in Paddington Station, and the nurturing mother says, Mrs. Brown says, we can't just leave him here. There's no knowing what might happen to him. And then on the very next page, Mr. Brown, who's very responsible, says, I'm sure there's a law about it. Like, can we legally take this bear? Yeah. All she sees is this bear child needing help. And he sees, oh no, we could get in trouble. We've got to legally deal with this. So I think the family is great. I think that Paddington's sense of adventure is great. He has all these first adventures that he's never done before, like going shopping and going on an escalator in a tube station.
Well, every single one of those adventures turns into just this moment of almost absurdity at times.
Total absurdity, because he's in trouble in every single one of them. He goes to the theater for the first time. He goes to the seaside for the first time. Everything that he does, just even being out at night after the play, and he's so appreciative of just being out at night in the dark with the lights. He's excited about everything. But he's in trouble in every single one of them.
There's a great, what I love about this, in my copy of the book, there's a great letter in the back from the author. And he talks about how the book came to be, and he was just sitting, and he said it came about largely by accident, and he was just looking at a toy bear. And so he just started writing about this bear and his adventures. And the letter is really interesting because he said the hardest part about Paddington is not getting him into trouble, which he does on his own, but getting him out of it in a morally justifiable way. And so I think that's what's really it kind of made me think of the Inklings in this way, putting something extraordinary in an ordinary setting and just watching that play out, because that is because it's the new world. It's the Paddington is the unusual element of it, but putting him in the ordinary world, of his family and of London is just such an adventure. And oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say my favorite one is when he's got his new hat and they go shopping, and he goes and he's sitting there waiting supposedly not getting in trouble, and the hat falls over his eyes, but he doesn't know it. He's just like, all of a sudden everything's dark outside.
For instance, when he's eating the marmalade at the train station for the first time when they first meet him, and it's everywhere. And as an adult, you think, this is. I remember when my toddlers did this. You would think, how can a single chocolate chip cause so much disaster?
That's right.
And that's what happens to Paddington. It's just like, how did this escalate to such severity?
And then he says, which this is reminiscent to me of Winnie the Pooh, his love of marmalade, whereas Winnie the Pooh is this love of honey, and he's so obsessed with it, and it's a huge part of his life. It means so much to him. Food means so much to him, and he says he's going to have to take a bath. They tell him that the children are supposed to take him up to take a bath, which is another awful thing. He floods the house and almost drowns, and but he says it seemed a pity to wash it all off quite so soon.
Yeah, that's right.
He's totally happy to be a sticky bear. So I just think it's really funny. But my favorite passage, can I just tell you my favorite?
I think this is your second favorite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
my second
your
favorite.
real favorite.
Okay. So this is when they are in he has the suitcase with bacon in it.
Yes.
And,
The dogs are following.
Yes, and Mrs. Brown says, "Can you smell that, Paddington? I feel like I'm smelling the smell of bacon everywhere." And he sticks his little suitcase behind him and sniffs. And then it says, he had several expressions which he kept for emergencies. There was his thoughtful expression when he stared into space and rested his chin on a paw.
Yeah.
Then there was his innocent one, which wasn't really an expression at all. So, you could just see him with this innocent stare, like he knows there's bacon in his suitcase.
That's so reminiscent of Winnie the Pooh. And in fact, we talked about the similarities between Paddington the Bear and Winnie the Pooh. And they both, the author in both situations, just basically makes the statement, well, I'm that sort of a bear. That's,
right. Yes.
And there's a lot of similar language between the two. But when you're talking about Paddington's, ready-made expressions, and then the whole escapade with Pooh and the solution to this drama that they were in was to say, aha.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's just...
And they didn't know why they were saying, aha.
Just the ideas of children are just so charming, and bears.
Yes, and bears. And then, so we go from his several expressions that he's got to when they're in the tailor's, and Mrs. Brown's trying to get clothes for him, and the tailor is not at all fond of having
I
a
actually
bear.
love that scene.
It is wonderful, and the tailor suggests that they go to the basement and get something out of the government surplus.
That's right. Yeah.
And Mrs. Brown is just offended by that, and then she says, "I've never heard of such a thing. Have you, Paddington?" Well, he's never heard of the government surplus. He doesn't even know what it is, but he takes her haughty tone and says, "Never." He stared hard at the man, who looked away uneasily. Paddington had a very persistent stare when he cared to use it. It was a very powerful stare. And then as Paddington's following the guy out, he keeps about 2 feet behind him, staring very hard. The back of the man's neck seemed to go a dull red, and he fingered his collar nervously. I mean,
It is funny.
this little bear who, so then even later,
She's,
okay, I'm going to stop.
if you ever need to pick me up now, you
That's
know.
right. You just need to pick up Paddington,
That's right.
and you're good to go.
I should read a chapter out
Well,
of
I think
Paddington every day.
this is demonstrating the value of the book. I mean, even if we can't find some kind of transcendent thing,
and there's not,
to it,
and I don't think there is anything transcendent.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it's a book full of manners and hospitality and the way that we should treat each other, and raising, being raised. He was raised by his aunt.
Respect that he
yes,
had for-
respect for
Yes.
for etiquette,
Right.
even, and their love of each other and respect for each other. It's a book, that shows a family dealing well with each other, not judging each other. I mean, you could say that the parents are a little bit more hands-off than they probably should be.
right.
But they
Right.
do, like the Moffats. I mean, I think that I mean, in these stories of all these escapades, I mean, I think what is lovely to point out is the reason that that they are able to have these great adventures is because there is a complementary attitude of forgiveness and mercy. And so just like in the Moffats, they have these adventures and mother corrects them, but she also, accepts, that they are going to make mistakes, and she offers forgiveness when the time comes. And so
That's right.
that's kind of the same attitude I think that the Browns have. They just sort of like tisk, tisk, tisk with Paddington. And so I think that, when it doesn't go too far, when it's not too extreme, that is a great reminder to parents is you have to give that space for that growth. I mean,
growth and
that's right.
And the opportunity to make mistakes.
Right.
That children need the opportunity to make mistakes because that's how they learn. And so I do think that the Browns, when I was looking back through this last night, I saw there was at some point it said that he had been with them for 2 months toward the end of the book. So all of these escapades happen almost
Very
immediately,
quickly. Yeah.
right? And so there's not a big time lapse here, but still, every time he gets in trouble, and it's a lot, every single chapter he's in trouble for he's done something,
Right.
but he seems to come out on top.
Well,
but
doesn't
they
his
never
father say he
say-
always lands on his feet?
he always
Yeah.
lands
Right.
on his feet, right?
But
And
they say that they never talk about maybe this is too much for us. I mean, they have literally embraced him as a member of their family immediately. And they never back out of that or
Right.
attempt to say maybe this was a mistake, maybe we don't need a bear living in our house. It's this unconditional love
It's
for a
interesting.
new family member.
And something that popped out at me when I was reading this was that they did take Paddington on, and it was an unusual thing, just like Popper took the penguins on.
Right.
And in both books, there is language that says, "Should we report this to someone? Like this is highly unusual, And in
Right.
both situations, they wonder, like, this is an unprecedented thing. What should we do? How should we do this? And yet they both take on these quite unusual newcomers into
Right.
their families and embrace it and enjoy it and benefit so tremendously,
Yeah.
from that.
Oh,
But-
yes. I mean, he's definitely a benefit to their family.
right.
And there are lots more Paddington stories. I suppose I should read them.
If you're ever glum, then you can.
That's
You'll
right.
just be laughing in your office.
But I think there is nothing really deep in this story, but it is a great story I think our teachers they read it as a read aloud to their students, and I think they love it as a break.
Yes.
We make our students do a lot of hard work, and we are always pushing them, to think deeply. But here, it's like a time when in the classroom, they can just all come together for sheer enjoyment and laughter and just enjoy each other in that lighthearted way. So I do think it serves a very good purpose there, even if you didn't want to just study it with a guide.
But also, it's a great introduction to the culture of London, and
Yes.
I think it might be one of the first stories where the students are really outside for American children to be outside of their country, right?
Right.
And so, just an idea.
I think
of,
so.
I think it
That's
is.
right.
And so, the students, in our 4th, 5th grade curriculum, that they are in Europe. I mean, they're in Haiti and they're
Right.
Lion, Witch, and
But
Wardrobe, and
this
they are
is-
in Europe. But this
that's
is their
true.
first introduction to a little bit of a new language. Just
Right.
some
New terminology.
That's right, new terminology and marmalade even, and train stations that may be unfamiliar
Yes.
to them. And so just, a very enjoyable introduction to,
A different culture.
That's right, a different culture, a new place, a little bit beyond their backyard.
Right.
It's a great way to do that too.
And I think we just have to come back to Vegan's point that, that we just not spoil it by really trying to think about it too deeply. It really is a story to be enjoyed. And there are great things that we can point out in it, but ultimately it's just fun.